Imagine being bullied relentlessly for 7 years, mocked for your identity, your family, your struggles. Imagine planning revenge so carefully it took months, and then executing it with surgical precision. This isn't just a story of payback, it's a journey through trauma, survival, and finally, one unforgettable moment of power. This is the tale of how one teen, broken by the world, found their strength in the unlikeliest way through revenge. When I was a kid, life felt normal, almost happy even. We weren't rich, but we were stable. She was younger than me, diagnosed with autism early on, and prone to sudden fits of rage or frustration. It was colder. I missed the version of my mom who used to smile at me in the mornings instead of coming home, smelling like cologne and cheap perfume. I didn't know it then, but the grief and loneliness were planting seeds of bitterness, of anger, of something dark that would grow inside me over the next 7 years. Mina, but this was just the beginning. The real nightmare was waiting for me at that new school where bullies circled like vultures, picking at every weakness, every raw spot in my life. And eventually, that nightmare would push me to a place I never thought I'd go, a place where revenge was the only thing that felt like it made sense anymore. There was no warmth in the hallways, no one who knew us or cared about what we'd been through. Mom was gone most nights. I'd try to keep my sister calm, distract her with cartoons, or rock her to sleep when she got too overwhelmed. At 8 years old, I learned what it meant to grow up fast. I learned how to cook ramen noodles on the stove without burning them, how to patch holes in secondhand clothes, how to help my sister through a meltdown without flinching when she screamed. She had trouble controlling her impulses, and one day she lashed out at a kid in class who teased her for stimming too loudly. That attack got her expelled. The principal said she was a danger to other children, like she was some kind of monster. We had no choice but to move schools, partly because she was kicked out, partly because Mom couldn't pay for us to stay there anyway. My dad worked hard, and my mom stayed home, taking care of me and my little sister. My dad was driving home from work, humming along to some old country song on the radio at least. That is how I like to imagine it, when a truck driver blew through a red light and hit him broadside. He died instantly. The funeral was small. The casket looked too big for how I remembered him, my giant, protective dad reduced to a silent figure lying beneath polished wood. There were birthday parties with cake and cheap decorations, nights watching old VHS tapes on our tiny TV, and afternoons spent outside catching fireflies until we couldn't keep our eyes open. It wasn't perfect, but it was safe. Then, one rainy afternoon when I was 8, everything shattered. My mom fell apart in ways I couldn't understand then. Grief turned into fear when the bills started stacking up. We went from maybe we can afford this toy next month to maybe we'll have dinner tomorrow. She tried working a retail job at first, but it barely covered rent, let alone groceries and school supplies for me and my sister. Eventually, she started asking. I didn't really understand what that meant as a kid, just that strange men would drop by sometimes, and I'd be told to stay in my room, headphones on, eyes down. Meanwhile, my sister was struggling in her own way. The new school was nothing like the old one. I missed my dad. I didn't know it yet. The first day at the new school felt like stepping into a shark tank with a fresh cut on my leg. I could feel the stares the second I walked into the hallway, like people smelled weakness, something different, something they could sink their teeth into. The group of bullies who ruled the halls zeroed in on me immediately. They were athletes, loud, popular, the kind of kids teachers adored because they played baseball and football and kept the trophies coming. But behind the smiles and charm, they were vicious. It burned in my brain like a brand. Every day, I woke up dreading what new hell they'd bring. I just wanted it to stop, but they wouldn't stop. The part that hurts the most, ISNT, the pain at S, the part of you that gets used to it, the part that starts believing you deserve it, that was me, numb hollow, waiting for graduation, hoping they'd forget about me long enough for me to slip out of this place and never look back. So in the end, if anything, he was worse. It was like he sensed I was close to escape, close to freedom, and he couldn't stand the idea of me getting away without one last kick to the gut. I looked him in the eyes and I saw exactly what he was, a pully, a coward, a pathetic piece of trash who needed to hurt others to feel big. And I knew I wasn't going to be his punching bag anymore. I decided they'd have to learn the hard way what it felt like to be helpless, humiliated, and afraid. He grabbed me by the throat, slammed me against the wall, and called me a worthless piece of shit. They'd taken everything from me, my peace, my safety, my childhood. I was done suffering in silence. It was time for revenge. He said he hoped I ended up dead in a ditch, sucking off strangers for pennies like my mom. I stared at the ceiling, my sister snoring softly beside me, and I made a choice. No more hiding, no more waiting. I was going to make him and his little pack pet. I was going to give them something to fear, something to remember. I had spent 7 years trapped under their boots now. I was going to rip the boots off and smash their perfect little lives to pieces. He laughed while I struggled to breathe, while my vision blurred, and in that moment something snapped inside me. And Jared, he was going to be the first to feel it. Every night, I'd lie in bed with my sister curled up beside me, wondering how long I could keep taking it before I broke. The emotional toll built up like pressure in a pipe. Fear, rage, humiliation, a feeling of being less than human. I couldn't talk to my mom. She was always exhausted, worried about rent, worried about men following her home, worried about my sister's fits at school. And my sister was too young, too innocent in her own way, to understand what was happening to me. I had no one. They started small, whispering slurs under their breath as I passed in the hallway. The bullying had become part of my routine, like brushing my teeth or doing homework. It was just normal. But inside, I was dying. There were days I wanted to disappear, days I fantasized about never waking up again. I felt like there was something wrong with me, like maybe I really did deserve this. Maybe I was just broken in ways no one could fix. Freak tranny mummy's little whore. They mocked the way I walked, the way I spoke, the clothes I wore. Something else was starting to grow. It started small, a tiny ember, glowing in the dark, whispering that maybe I didn't have to take it forever. Maybe there was a way to fight back, to flip the pain around and make them feel even half of what they made me feel. I didn't know how yet, but every insult, every shove, every filthy joke was feeding that ember, and eventually it would become a bonfire that burned everything they loved to ashes. Every single day it felt like they were stripping away another piece of me. I was scrawny, quiet, and awkward. I was a ghost. I'd learned how to disappear in the hallways, how to avoid eye contact, how to move so quietly no one noticed me unless they wanted to. But it didn't matter. They still found me. They still spit their insults at me, still shoved me into lockers, still whispered about my mom, my sister, my body. 7 years of this, 7 years of feeling like prey. They took that knowledge and twisted it like a knife. And there was always one in particular, let's call him Jared. He wasn't just a ringleader, he was the one with the meanest streak. He was bigger than the others, stronger, and so damn good at hiding his cruelty from adults. To them, he was the golden boy, a star pitcher on the baseball team, a charming smile that fooled every teacher and parent. But to me, he was a nightmare. He once dislocated my shoulder in gym class for no reason, just laughed and said it was an accident. He shoved me into a urinal so hard I almost cracked my head open. He pissed on me once, in the locker room, while his friends laughed and took videos. He told me that I'd probably follow in my mom's footsteps, sucking dick for money just to stay alive. They'd joke that maybe she should be put down like a dog, or call her retard sister, or ask if I was going to snap and attack someone like her too. They were relentless. And the teachers, they didn't do shit. They saw them as good kids, just boys being boys, harmless, teasing. But it wasn't harmless. It was poison, dripping into every part of my life. Worse, I was a trap, as they liked to call me, someone who didn't fit cleanly into boy or girl, someone who dared to look different. And different, in that place, was unforgivable. It didn't take long for the torment to start, but it wasn't just me they targeted. They found out about my sister, the fact that she was autistic, that she sometimes had outbursts or needed extra help in class. Every day, I'd watch them swagger down the hallway, shoving kids into lockers, high-fiving each other, living in a world where they were untouchable. That one stuck with me by the time high school rolled around. But beneath that hopelessness, I didn't want revenge at first. By senior year, the thing about being broken for so long is you stop even noticing the cracks. It just becomes normal. But they never stopped. Jared never stopped. Even when college scouts came sniffing around, even when teachers started whispering about scholarships and big futures, he never let up. One day in the locker room, he cornered me while the others held the door shut. I don't know how to describe it. I just stopped being afraid. Everything in me turned cold and clear. That night, I couldn't sleep. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew it was going to hurt, and I was going to savor every second of it. The day I decided to fight back, something shifted in my brain. All the fear, all the dread, it didn't disappear, but it turned into something sharper. I started paying attention in a way I never had before. Instead of avoiding them, I watched them. Instead of shrinking when they walked by, I memorized every step they took. I knew revenge wasn't something I could rush. If I was going to do this, I needed to do it right. What snacks they liked, what songs they played on their phones, where they kept their backpacks during lunch. I started sitting closer in class, pretending to scribble notes while actually writing down the times they asked to go to the bathroom, how long they were gone, who they talked to when the teacher wasn't looking. I drew maps, made lists, scribbled ideas in the margins of my notebooks. I felt like a predator, biding my time. Every day I woke up with a purpose. Every time they spat an insult at me, it just fueled the fire. They had no idea what I was planning. They thought I was the same scared kid I'd always been. But they were wrong. I was learning, watching, collecting everything I needed to make sure when I finally struck, they wouldn't see it coming. My sister would peek over sometimes, asking what I was doing. I started messing with their stuff, swapping their notebooks so they couldn't find homework they needed, flipping the order of their textbooks in their backpacks, sneaking in and emptying their pencil cases just enough to be annoying. Sometimes I'd leave a note in their lockers that just said tick, nothing more, just enough to make them wonder if someone was watching. And every day I got a little closer to the day I'd take back my power, the day I'd make them feel the fear and humiliation they'd made me swallow for so long. I'd hear them whisper about how someone must be screwing with them, accusing random classmates, threatening to beat up anyone who looked at them funny, better than I'd imagined. They were so used to being in control, to being feared, that they didn't know how to handle being the ones who felt hunted. And that was exactly what I wanted, because this was just the beginning. The petty stuff was the warm-up. The real revenge, the parts that would leave scars they couldn't hide, that was still to come. And I was going to savor every second of it. Every spilled water bottle, every toppled desk was a tiny victory, a spark in the darkness I'd been living in for so long. It wasn't enough to make up for what they'd done to me, but it was a start. It was proof that I could hurt them, that I could disrupt their perfect little world without them ever seeing me coming. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet, hiding in plain sight, savoring the confusion on their faces. It was coming, and I was going to be ready. I'd smile and say it was just homework. She didn't need to know. No one needed to know. I needed to know everything: where they went, when they were alone, what they cared about most, what they were afraid of. So I became invisible in a different way. Not the terrified kind of invisible, but the hunter kind. Quiet, patient, calculating. After school, I'd linger near the fields where they practiced baseball, hiding behind the bleachers or crouched in the shadows by the fence. Revenge isn't just about striking hard, it's about striking smart. If I went in swinging, I'd get caught. I needed to chip away at them first, make them second-guess their every move, plant a seed of doubt in their heads until they didn't know which way was up. So that's exactly what I did. I learned which cars they drove, which routes they took home, where they parked when they stopped at gas stations for snacks or smokes. They'd leave them sitting out on the bleachers during practice, or toss them on the floor in the locker room. I took a push pin and poked tiny holes near the top so small you couldn't see them unless you looked close. Then I'd sit back and watch as they took a swig, water dribbling down their chins and onto their clothes. They'd swear and throw the bottles against the fence, glaring around, confused and pissed off. Instead of waiting for them to hurt me, I was studying them, figuring out exactly where to strike, and carefully unscrew the bolts on their desk legs just enough so they looked normal, but wouldn't hold weight for long. By the end of the week, 2 of them had slammed their knees on the floor when the desks collapsed under them. The teacher thought it was shoddy school furniture, but I knew better, and so did they. They'd glance around the room, eyes darting, angry but unsure who to blame. And the more I watched, the more cracks I saw in their perfect facades. Jared liked to act tough, but he was careless, left his locker open when he rushed off to practice, left his phone lying around unlocked more than once. Another bully had an older brother who used to pick him up, but sometimes left him waiting alone in the parking lot when he ran late. Little weaknesses, little openings. I noted down license plate numbers, memorized patterns. I made mental maps of their neighborhoods, their houses, their routines. I took the long way home just so I could pass by Jared's house every day, counting how many times his parents' cars were in the driveway, what nights he stayed out late, what mornings he left early. I learned where he kept the spare key hidden on the porch. I noticed he always left his bedroom window cracked open in the spring. At school, I paid attention to the little things. It was obsessive. But it was also the first time in years that I felt like I was in control of something. Every night I sat in my room and wrote it all down. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like prey. Months passed like that. I waited, I gathered information, I built my plan piece by piece like a puzzle. I started small. The first thing I did was mess with their water bottles. It was stupidly easy. Next, I moved on to their desks. During lunch, when the classrooms were empty, I'd slip in. I didn't stop there. It was almost funny how fast the paranoia spread. They started snapping at each other over little things. And it felt good. I didn't rush it. I let them stew in the uncertainty. let them turn on each other. After weeks of small annoyances, I knew it was time to take things further. The little disruptions had rattled them, but they hadn't broken yet. They were still cocky, still tossing around insults and swaggering through the halls like nothing could touch them. So I decided to turn confusion into fear, paranoia into outright chaos. They'd come back from lunch or class to find their stuff caked in filth, unwearable and ruined. Some of them had to toss entire uniforms because the smell wouldn't come out. I wore gloves, cleaned up every trace, took different routes in and out of school so no one would notice me lingering after hours. I stole one of Jarrett's prized baseball bats. The one he bragged was signed by some minor league star, and snapped it in half, leaving the pieces in his locker with another note that said, "They walked in packs now." Eyes darting, voices low and nervous. Teachers started noticing their grades slipping, their focus fading. They weren't invincible anymore. They were human, vulnerable, scared. And that fear had tasted better than any petty prank or whispered insult ever could. Still watching, I slashed holes in the seats of their cars so the foam spilled out. I stayed hidden behind the bleachers, machete wrapped in an old towel so no one could see. I unwrapped the machete and started hacking. Wood cracked and splintered, metal clanged and rang out. Earlier that week I'd gotten my hands on a handful of little fireworks with enough force to make a grown man jump out of his skin. I rigged them inside a few bags so that when they opened the zippers, the fuse would spark. I knew they wouldn't kill anyone, but they'd scare the shit out of them and leave an unforgettable mark. I ripped open their bags, slashing jerseys and cleats to ribbons, pouring coyote urine into the seams. His face was red, fists clenched, barking orders at his friends while they frantically checked their cars, finding slashed seats, punctured tires, ruined transmissions, but no one had any. And me, I just watched from a distance, silent and calm, the machete hidden back under my bed at home. Their sacred place had been desecrated, turned into a war zone. And for once, they couldn't do a damn thing about it. I scattered beds of nails in front of their tires, hiding them just under a dusting of gravel so they wouldn't notice until it was too late. I also packed river clay into a few of their car transmissions, jamming up the gears until the engines would seize up. Their prized bats, those polished, expensive symbols of their power, reduced to kindling under the blade. I watched them laugh and joke with each other, oblivious to the nightmare I was about to unleash. When they finally cleared out, most of them heading to the parking lot, I slipped in through the side gate, heart pounding but hand steady. Maybe the dread eating at them was enough to balance the scales. But then I'd remember the years they spent tormenting me, the look on Jarrett's face when he pinned me against the wall and told me I was worthless. I slipped out the side gate and disappeared into the night, adrenaline buzzing through my veins like lightning. The next day, the fallout was immediate. I watched from across the field as they stormed into the locker room, heard the muffled booms of the M80s going off. They spilled out into the hallway screaming, covered in shredded gear, the stench of coyote piss and panic clinging to them like a cloud. Their ticket to college, their claim to fame, the thing that made teachers, parents, and classmates look at them like heroes instead of monsters. It was sacred ground, a place where they felt invincible. That's why I knew it had to be next. If I was going to break them, I had to destroy what they loved most. The smell of piss in the locker room when they humiliated me. And I knew I wasn't done. I jammed gum into the locks of their lockers so they couldn't open them without prying them apart. I wanted them to lose something they loved, to watch it burn just like they'd burned away my hope, my happiness, my childhood. So I started planning the next step, the real blow that would leave scars they couldn't hide, wounds they'd never fully heal. And I was going to hit them where it hurt the most, their precious baseball team, and their golden boy leader. I moved like a ghost through the hallways, and no one suspected a thing. Watching them dry heave while they scraped crap out of their shoes was the sweetest thing I'd ever seen. I started with something fun. There was this old bait shop near the edge of town where hunters bought coyote urine to keep predators away from livestock. The smell was stomach-churning like rotting meat mixed with sour ammonia. I scraped together some cash and bought a few bottles. Then, late at night, I'd sneak into the locker room or the team's equipment shed and soak their baseball gloves, batting helmets, and gym bags with it. The next day, the stench hit them like a punch in the face. They gagged and cursed, pulling their gear apart, trying to figure out what the hell happened. The whole place reeked so bad the coach had to call practice early and send them home. They accused each other, even blamed some freshmen on the team for pulling a prank, but none of them had any proof. I didn't stop there. I collected animal droppings, dog shit from alleys, whatever I could find, and packed it into their cleats and gym lockers. The next day, they were on edge, looking over their shoulders, jumping at every noise. They argued more, shoving each other in the hallways, accusing each other of screwing around with their stuff. Jared was especially pissed. He was used to being the one in control, the one everyone else feared, and now he was the one with dog shit in his cleats, the one whose bag smelled like a dead animal. He smashed a locker door so hard the metal bent, screaming that he was going to find out who did this and make them bleed. But he had no clue. None of them did. I was careful. Once they were good and rattled, I took it a step further. The entire vibe around them shifted. They went from kings of the school to twitchy wrecks. I could have stopped there. Part of me thought maybe they'd learned enough of a lesson, because the fear was good, but I wanted them to hurt. Baseball wasn't just a sport to them, it was their identity. I waited until late one afternoon when practice was winding down. The locker room was empty. Just rows of bags, bats, helmets, and gloves lined up like offerings at an altar. Then I moved on to the traps. In the parking lot I had one last surprise. Before I left, I sprayed a message on the inside of the locker room door in bright red paint. Your game is over. I didn't wait around to see the chaos firsthand. Jared looked like he was ready to kill someone. They had no idea who to blame. They threw accusations around, fought among themselves, dragged teachers and coaches into the mess, demanding answers. They thought they ruled this school, ruled this town, that no one could touch them. Now they knew better, and this was just the beginning of the end. The chaos at school was just the appetizer. I knew the only way to truly end this, to make sure Jared never came back from the damage, was to hit him where he lived, his home. The one place he probably thought was safe. The place he strutted out of every morning thinking he owned the world. I waited until I was sure he was gone. I knew his schedule by heart, what time he left for early morning workouts, what nights his parents worked late, what window he always left cracked for fresh air. I cranked the showers to max heat, opened the fridge doors, and dumped condiments all over the kitchen floor. I grabbed a hammer from the garage and punched massive holes in the walls, bashing plaster and wood until dust filled the air. I'd brought laxatives with me, taken them before I broke in, and by the time I was finished with the rest of the house, I was ready. I went back to his room, pulled down my pants, and smeared shit and piss across his walls, his bed, his clothes. I coated his trophies, the ones he was so proud of, with filth. I scrawled "I'm watching you" into the mess with my finger, making sure it was the last thing he saw when he opened the door. The kid who used to strut through the halls like he owned the place looked like a ghost. His eyes were hollow, rimmed with red from sleepless nights spent cleaning up the mess I left. But the damage was done. He punched me hard across the jaw, right in front of the principal. That was all they needed. Jared was hauled out, suspended first, then expelled completely. His baseball career was gone overnight. Now, he had nothing. For the first time in years, I had everything. I had peace. And best of all, I had my revenge. He flinched whenever his phone buzzed, and he'd randomly lashed out at people in the hallway, shoving them aside, cursing them out. Not the teachers, not the police, not even Jared's dumbass friends. I was invisible again, but this time, on my terms. I walked through the halls with my head high, my body bruised, but my spirit buzzing with victory. Picture frames fell, glass shattering across the carpet. No one saw me, no one suspected a thing. I wore gloves, a hoodie, and covered my shoes with plastic bags, so I wouldn't leave prints. I overheard in the halls that the utility bill was through the roof, that the house stank so bad they couldn't sleep in their rooms, that Jared's parents were furious and scrambling to figure out how the hell it happened. Jared's parents clamped down on him, pulled him out of games, tried to control him, but it was too late. His grades slipped, his temper got worse, and the fear in his eyes was plain as day. Jared himself started unraveling at school. He screamed at people, shoved random kids, looking for someone to blame. When he finally snapped and attacked me in front of everyone, he got expelled on the spot. I logged into every social media account he left open and changed the passwords, locking him out completely. His perfect life, his spotless reputation, his precious baseball career wrecked. Just like he'd tried to wreck me, I'd never got caught. I never apologized. And for the first time in my life, I felt proud. Then I reset the internet router and changed the Wi-Fi password to something random he'd never guessed. I put explicit details in there, enough to make sure he'd get flooded with calls, texts, strangers showing up at his door. I wanted his life to be unlivable, just like he'd made mine. The adrenaline made me feel alive in a way nothing else ever had. Crawling through that window was easier than I expected. I slipped inside and paused, listening. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge and the creak of the pipes. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. I started in his room. First, I dismantled his bed frame, leaving the bolts scattered so the whole thing would collapse if he tried to sit on it. Then I went to his computer, his precious gaming rig he always bragged about at school, and tore out wires, unscrewed panels, yanked a hard drive clean out. I opened his browser and downloaded every gay porn virus-ridden site I could find, filling the desktop with tabs and files. Next, I moved through the house, turning on every light, every faucet, every burner on the stove. Then came the Craigslist ad. I posted it from his own computer, describing a petite gay boy offering free anal at his address, phone number included. But I wasn't done yet. I saved the most personal touch for last. When I was done, I cleaned myself up, slipped back out the window, and disappeared into the night. The fallout was immediate and delicious. I walked away, bruised but smiling. He was gone. After that night, everything started to unravel for Jared. Word spread fast about what happened at his house, neighbors gossiping, kids whispering about the Craigslist ad, the police showing up when strangers knocked on the door looking for the free party he promised. When he finally snapped, charging at me in the middle of the hallway, screaming that I'd ruined his life, the teachers broke it up in seconds. Meanwhile, I kept my head down, playing the innocent victim. No one suspected me, I never got caught, and I never felt sorry. Jared had taken so much from me, my safety, my childhood, my confidence. Looking back now, years later, I still think about what I did. I think about the fear in Jared's eyes, the chaos, the ruined trophies and the shredded baseball bats. If maybe there was another way, a better way, a way that didn't involve destroying someone's life, the way they tried to destroy mine. But the truth is, I don't regret it. I think about the night I crawled through his window with revenge in my veins, about how it felt to finally flip the power balance. And yes, sometimes I wonder if I went too far. Because that revenge had saved me. It pulled me out of the pit they spent years shoving me into. It reminded me I wasn't weak, that I wasn't worthless, that I could fight back. It gave me pride. It gave me power. And for the first time, I felt like I had control over my own story. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't clean or noble, but it was real and it was necessary. That darkness was the only way I could heal. I don't need revenge anymore. Sometimes you have to take it. And I took mine. I've built a better life since then, found friends who actually see me, started believing I deserved to be here. But part of me will always remember that night, the smell of fresh paint on the locker room walls, the look on Jared's face when he realized he couldn't touch me anymore. But when the world breaks you and no one helps, the only option left is to fight back in your own way. I don't know if it was right, but it gave me peace. If you've ever felt powerless, remember, your story isn't over, and sometimes the best payback is survival. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story hit home. Until next time, stay strong. I hope he remembers too, because no matter what anyone says, sometimes the world doesn't give you justice. Sometimes revenge isn't pretty. Sometimes it's not even legal.